Welcome to Success Your Own Way, a podcast about how real people define and redefine success throughout their careers. Hosted by Tina Shurick and Ifat Rogers, this show features candid conversations with guests who've made intentional choices, navigated change, and built lives aligned to their values. Their guests share their stories as well as strategies and tactics that help them along the way. Tina's a certified coach and a former corporate leader who supports professionals in making confident, values-driven decisions. Ifat is a consultant with a background in food science and engineering, helping people solve complex problems with a practical, no-nonsense approach. Each episode offers inspiration and actionable insights for anyone rethinking what success looks like in their life and how to get there.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Success Your Own Way. Today, Tina and I are happy to host Paul Boehnke. Well, hi, Paul.
Welcome, Paul. Before we let Paul sit on the hot seat and take our questions, I'll give a brief introduction of who Paul is. He's a speaker, author, and certified life coach who helps solopreneurs find alignment with their business so that they can have greater impact, make more money, and have some fun. First, as a classical musician and now a coach, Paul has lived the entrepreneurial life for 30 years. And during that journey, he's discovered what really matters in business building and loves sharing that with others. In his book, Thoughts on Demand, Turn Negative Self-Talk into Unstoppable Confidence, he shares the process that he uses to help clients transform that little voice in their heads from an adversary to an ally. And when he's not wrangling those inner critics, others in his life know him as a decent cook, lover of British murder mysteries, and a mediocre swimmer. Can't wait to hear more about that. Welcome, Paul. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Yes, a mediocre swimmer, just because I can swim, but people who are swimmers go so much faster than I do in the lane. So, okay.
Yes, and they breathe way better than I do.
Yes, but I figure since my swimming is so inefficient, I'm getting better exercise.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Great point.
That's my rationalization.
I love it. Well, I've given the audience a little bit of a teaser on who you are, but in your own words, why don't you tell us your story? How did you get where you are today?
Well, as you mentioned, I was a classical musician for 30 years and loved doing that. It was a great way to make a living and fun things to do. And, the important parts about being an artist, I think, is really so much more than sort of mastering the tools of your art. Mm-hmm. It's really about mastering yourself. And I have to say that was the part about being a musician I loved the most, was really sort of clearing out my own issues, my own fears, my own whatever, so that creativity has a place to be. And that, for me, was the most satisfying part of being a musician and what I loved helping students with, and they seem to love it as well. And at some point, I sort of had this sense that, I think my life as a musician is kind of coming to an end. Mm. There was just this sense about it. Yeah. But I wasn't quite sure what direction I would be heading in. But I ended up moving in the direction of coaching, which on the outside, I think to many of my colleagues sort of looked at me like, you're doing what? But on the inside, it really felt like a move from one direction to just a slightly different direction. Yeah. Because it's such similar work and working on the inside of people.
Yeah, so true. I love that. Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
So, Paul, with that, we call the podcast Success Your Own Way. What's your definition of success now, and how has it changed over your career or before?
Yeah, so I think like so many people, as I was growing and getting started in the world, success has a tendency to look like, do I have the cool gigs and what's my bank account look like?
Right. Right.
That's what most people sort of recognize as success or lack of. And there's nothing wrong with having success in that way. I have found for me, I'm focusing much more on what is the experience I'm having? Is this fun to do? And approaching everything through curiosity and not being so attached to what's the certain outcome that I'm trying to get to. But I know I'm going in this direction. I'm dying to know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, that's so true. I think we've had a few guests on who have had a similar experience in that their lifestyle has changed or something outside has happened to them that has caused them to really redefine and take a closer look at their life. Was there a defining moment for you, Paul, where you were not looking at that bank account, as much anymore. And you were really focused on that, what's going on inside, and am I living the life I want and having the joy that I need?
Well, I will give you a disappointing answer. No.
Okay.
People love it when lightning strikes and there's this huge transformation. It's dramatic and it's fun to think about. My journey was kind of dull in that it was just every year, every week, every day, there was just little switches, little growths that would happen for me. And that, you add that up after a few decades and there's some significant changes. So I wouldn't say that there was a particular thing that happened.
Yeah.
Maybe just growing up,
Yeah.
which takes a little time.
And it's ongoing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you.
So with that, with kind of like the little moments, can you help for me, it was kind of difficult to start to identify, I'm no longer going up. For my definition of success, which is more similar to yours.
Mhm.
But it's hard to recognize when the changes are so small. It's difficult to recognize. Any advice, or how can our listeners think about identifying such small incremental changes instead of going from great one day to this is not working for me a year later?
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind. First of all, anytime, well, I will speak from my experience. Anytime I found myself attached to an outcome, struggle came along with it. Um, I've had mixed relationship to goals and goal setting, and I will say almost every one of my coaching clients right now hates goals, which maybe this reflects me. I'm not sure, but we're now thinking of goals as defining what direction I'm going to head. I'm going to go towards that rather than something else. But not to say this is the place that I'm trying to get to. So we sort of release that expectation of I have to have this goal, which creates so much struggle and tends to have a lot of resistance sort of built into that whole pathway.
Yeah.
And when we can more joyfully and with more curiosity simply go in the direction we intend, it is so much easier, so much more fun. When you think about success in terms of money, how do you let go of that outcome? That's a tricky one to let go of. And in this world, we all need some money. I mean,
right.
We have to usually buy food. Usually we have to pay for some place to live, clothes, that kind of thing. So money is a thing that's hard to ignore. And the way it helped me the most is to think as little as I could about money. I mean, you can't get rid of it all the time, but think as little as I could and think as much as I could about other ways that I experienced abundance. And then you become aware of that. There's this part of our brain called the reticular activating system, whose job is to sort things into two piles. The information we get, one pile says, ignore this, and the other says, pay attention to this.
Okay.
And when I went out looking for where do I find abundance, that tells my brain, oh, go look for this. This is the stuff not to ignore. This is the stuff to pay attention to. And I am astonished at how much abundance is just beaming at us all the time. And all we need to do is sort of shift our focus a little bit to be able to see it. One of the examples that I think is sort of the easiest experience for people to have of what abundance feels like is how often do you exhale and worry about whether there's going to be enough air to inhale? Do you ever think about that?
No, never.
No.
I'd say I have.
That's an
But I will now.
Sorry. But no, that's an experience of abundance. It's just present and I'm not thinking about it. I know air is here. I know that I can breathe. When we can approach other things like that, like money, it comes and goes. And often people also think of abundance in terms of a pile of stuff, a big pile of money. And I think abundance is much more of flow. It's money that comes in and out and in and out. And it's not just money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything, whether it's love or food or air or whatever, experiences. It's
Mhm.
always coming and it's always going. And just being aware of the fact that there's always so much more to come in, so many more experiences.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming how much abundance is there. And all of a sudden you've forgotten that, oh, my bank account is getting close to zero. This doesn't feel good, you know?
Sure, sure.
I will just go on. So how do you solve the bank account problem? You know, it's great to feel good, but if you can't afford groceries, then what?
Yes.
We do need to operate in this world in a way that brings in money. You need to find a way to do that in some manner. And if so, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and if at the beginning of a business it's not coming in the way you want, there can be a lot of fear around that. Sometimes we just need to find some sort of income, even if it's doing something else, simply to calm the anxiety and not see it as a, well, I guess I'm not making money the way I want to. No, no, no. You're planting the seeds to allow you to experience the abundance of where you're going. It's
Yeah.
just going to take another week or a month or whatever.
Right.
So I don't want to ignore the fact that we need to figure out a way for money to come in. But if that's our focus, then we fall into this whole world of scarcity, which only keeps money away from us. So,
Yeah, so much wonderful stuff in what you said, Paul. Back to the goals being so much destination driven as opposed to kind of journey driven, which is what I heard you say. Like that becomes really, really important when you're also seeking that abundance. You're like,
yeah.
I'm on this path, and the path is what's important, not always necessarily the outcome. So I took that away. And this idea of abundance, and it made me start to think about when that inner critic starts to creep in. And I know that that's an area that you do a lot of coaching around. I'm curious, why did you choose to really focus your energy around the inner critic, and what have you seen that have an impact on when it comes to this seeking of abundance?
So I became interested in inner critic partly because I'd done a lot of work myself around that. I mean, if you think of performers and performance anxiety or things, what's going on in your head? How do you deal with that? As a performer, I needed to train my brain to think what I needed it to think and then to do it on cue, because the audience was sitting there. It's not like, I don't think I feel like it right now. That's not an option. So I got good at that kind of thing, getting my brain to do what I wanted. And then becoming more aware of the other sort of negative thoughts that had nothing to do with my music making, possibly, but how might I use some of these skills to transform these other parts of my life?
Yeah.
And through my coach training also, it seemed to me that the inner critic problems, issues, however you want to refer to that, are at the root of almost everything else. And I thought, if I can solve this problem, all the other ones go away.
Right.
So why mess with the other ones? Let's just go straight to the core and be done with it. That's why I got interested in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. How does it relate to abundance, if at all? Do you see a connection between quieting that inner critic and welcoming abundance into your life as opposed to scarcity?
Yeah. So I think what's crucial and the most obvious connection I think there is the inner critic is about the stories that we tell ourselves. What are the thoughts I'm having? Okay. If the thoughts are about scarcity, well, that's what the reticular activating system will go looking for and say, oh yeah, there's another experience of scarcity. Here, let's bring more experiences because this is clearly important to you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Or we could say, how do I look for abundance? And not worry about whether it's a pile of money, but just how do I experience it? What is it like to live an abundant life? And the more experiences you have in that way, the more experiences like that you have, and it starts spreading out through your whole life.
You probably, so there is a personal growth with that, because again, with success your own way, what may be abundance when you're 25 is not the same as abundance when you're 45 or 55 or 65. It changes. So it goes with kind of like defining, redefining, assessing every once in a while. And really, sometimes we get on auto. We have a goal or we have a path and we just go on it, but we don't stop to reassess, even, is this the abundance that I'm seeking?
Yes. You know, my business took a major turn for the better
Mhm.
when I really consciously let go of any sort of outcome goal things and
Yeah.
just said, I'm curious. You know, speaking is something that I love to do.
Okay.
So speaking is something that I really love to do. Um, and I started, looking for more opportunities to speak, and then they would start to come and they would turn into others. And I got a very unexpected message through my website at the beginning of the year from somebody in Iceland who wanted me to come speak at a conference there.
Wow.
And inside and outside, I was thinking I was looking and feeling just like your faces did right there. It was like,
Giddy.
pardon me?
Yeah.
Really? And I thought, oh, okay, this is probably going to be a virtual thing. I mean, blah, blah.
Sure.
No, they wanted me to go to Iceland and speak and do a day-long workshops. Like,
Oh my
well,
goodness.
fun. Okay.
Yes.
And I thought after that became clear that this was beginning to happen, I thought, I wonder what's next. And I'm really focused right now on curiosity. Like, I have no idea what's coming. Other opportunities that I'm in the middle of sort of negotiating with about speaking are coming. It's like, well, let's see what happens there. I don't know, but curiosity, first of all, is way more fun.
Yes.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
And I'm not disappointed so easily because I'm just curious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. It's so important. I was coaching someone just last week. He was going to have a difficult conversation with someone. And he's like, well, I'm just going to have to give the feedback. And I said, well, what if you approach that in a more open and curious kind of way? And he was a seasoned manager in his probably 50s. And that was the first time he'd ever considered interacting with someone and giving them a difficult message, but having to do it from a curious place. So that was really, I think, it was eye-opening and kind of surprising that would be a situation with leaders out there. Are there things that surprise you as you're coaching people and you go in with hopefully with curiosity and not judgment? But are there things that people bring to you that ever surprise you?
At one level, no. I mean, we're all people and we've all got stories, and there are amazing stories out there.
Sure.
And I've heard a lot of different stories. And so at one level, nothing much surprises me, except almost every single coaching session, somebody comes in and brings up my issues. What they're going through. I think, how did you know this is something that I'm struggling with right now?
Yes.
That's always the surprise. Like, I wasn't expecting that, but thank you.
Well, what do you do with that when someone brings something to you that you can relate to? Like, what do you do with it?
Well, of course, in a coaching relationship, the agenda is not mine. It's not about me. And so I have to very clearly say, oh, look at that. Here's this thing. Set my own judgments, fears aside and say, I wonder, and with curiosity, I wonder what I'm going to learn from this conversation from this person, Yeah. But simply move forward, examining that area.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we all, as coaches or therapists or whoever is working with people, we all have experiences and sometimes get triggered by what somebody says or how somebody looks or how somebody moves. And part of the job is to recognize that and to be able to sort of set it aside for the moment. You can go deal with it later, but while we're having this conversation, this is not part of the deal.
That's right. Good for you.
Yeah, so it's a skill.
Yes.
Anybody can learn that. It's not hard, though it comes with its own challenges.
Practice. Yeah, it takes practice.
Yeah.
For sure.
When we approach being a critic with curiosity, we really reduce its power. This process that I use with my clients, I don't know if you want me to go with it all.
Absolutely.
It's kind of useful. There are 4 phases, and I want to make clear that these are not steps. These are sort of phases that we work through and back and forth. And the first one is to simply recognize that all these messages that you hear from this little voice in your head are not you. They're just thoughts. And thoughts are just electrochemical signals in your brain. That's it. And when I first thought about that, I thought, yeah, that's kind of important, but duh, who doesn't know that? Well, it turns out a lot of people don't know that. I remember working with a client, and when he came to this realization that oh, those thoughts are not me. This huge weight was lifted off his shoulder. And I thought, okay, this is a really important thing. And it's a big one. So that's the first part. And curiosity helps when we can sort of separate ourselves from those thoughts and just be curious about them. That helps. The second phase is to sort of uncover the lie that this voice has been telling you. I have yet to meet an inner critic message which isn't ultimately based on a lie.
Yeah.
It comes with lots of evidence, usually, lots of rationalization and justification, and it tends to be kind of in your face and it's hard to ignore. And for me, that is the biggest clue. Because when somebody is trying to convince you of something, what do? Well, they bring up all the reasons you should believe what they want you to believe. They rationalize all the reasons that this is true. They will justify any weakness in their own argument. They will keep talking until you give in. So why do they work so hard, though?
Yeah.
I think they're working hard is because what they're trying to convince you of probably isn't true. Because the question becomes, how does truth convince us? It doesn't. It's just there for us to recognize. We can believe it or not. And it has nothing to do with who we are, or it's just there. And truth tends to be kind of a quiet affair. It speaks, I think, with that still small voice. And when we're filled with that activity and distraction, destructive distraction, how do you hear what truth is saying? So that inner critic, to me, its biggest clue is that it keeps going at us. It's like, oh, okay, this isn't true. And so the second phase is to just pull aside everything that's not true. So first we separate ourselves by saying, oh, it's not me. And then we realize that's not even true. There's a greater separation. It's like, oh, well, why would I believe that? This is crazy. Now that we've created this space between us, we need to consciously put something in that space. Otherwise, the old will come back. So let's create a new belief that you want. What do you want this voice telling you?
Right.
This is basically an affirmation. Some people love those. Some people think they're kind of a waste of time and energy. And why should I bother with this? Because it doesn't work.
Okay.
For those who've had that experience where it doesn't work, I'm willing to wager that regardless of how powerful any particular affirmation was that they were using, it wasn't the right one for them. So this third phase is about finding what's that affirmation that's right for you. And we do that by sort of taking our clues from the lies that we uncovered. Like, oh, those are the issues that we need to address. And once you've got a new message that, first of all, we want it at least to feel like relief. If we can get it to feel inspiring, so much the better. But relief is good.
Yeah.
You know, that's going in the right direction. Then I take my experiences as a musician and bring this to this and start practicing that new thought. You start making that a new mental habit. In a nutshell, that's the process.
I love that. Yes.
So as we're closing, this last piece actually ties directly to my last question. I don't know, Tina, if you're going to have another one afterwards, but great audience. Part of the reason is, when this episode is over, what's one question they can ask themselves, immediate next step they could take to kind of put them potentially on a different way, looking at abundance, looking at curiosity. What is one thing they could do at the end of this episode?
Well, I think you just listed two right there. Look for abundance, look for curiosity. There's a good, it depends on what they're trying to accomplish. If they're trying to deal with the inner critic, that first phase is to recognize, oh, this is not me. It's just a thought. Release that grip. That is huge. And if that's gotten good and you're thinking, okay, what's next? Well, start looking for what's not true and what is true, So that, I guess, would be my recommendation there.
Those are great. You're a good listener, Ifat. You're a good listener. You picked Paul's to-do list out there.
I am a facilitator and a moderator of focus groups. You have to do
good listening. Absolutely. Well, I do have one more question for Paul, which is, for our audience and for us, what's next for you? How do we keep in touch with you? How do we continue to follow your great work here, Paul?
Well, thank you for the question. Probably the best way to get in touch with me is probably through my website, which is just my name, paulboehnke.com. Last name took me 5 minutes before kindergarten. My mom sat me down at the table practicing my last name, you know. So Paul, P-A-U-L, that's pretty easy, but then B-O-E-H-N-K-E, that was hard,
Got it.
.com. I also have a YouTube channel, and it's YouTube/@InnerCriticCoach.
Okay.
And find I've got a lot of things up there that hopefully are really helpful to people. That what can I do right now?
Yeah, we'll definitely check it out. But first, I'm going to read the book that,
Yes.
that I
Same.
just got. So I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. Well, we have really enjoyed having you, Paul. Thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing all of your wisdom with our audience. I definitely learned something, and
A lot.
a lot, actually. Absolutely. So, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, comment. Tell us what else you want to have, what else you would like to learn from our Success Your Own Way podcast.
Yes. And until next time, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Paul. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Success Your Own Way. We hope you found this episode inspiring and took away actionable insights. Please tune in for our next episode. And if you know someone who is rethinking what success looks like in their life, please share this episode with them.